All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Diana Kreymer. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce you all this afternoon to our facilities reopening town hall. If you have not yet had the chance to meet with me, my name is Diana Kreymer, and I serve as the assistant to the president and the director of the president's office here at Hostos Community College. This afternoon, we do want to share some information with you all, and it will be a chance for our college community to get an opportunity to hear more about the campus operations that have been done thus far, and to safely prepare for a return for all to the campus. As a reminder, this event is being recorded, and we do have the subtitles, the closed captioning at the bottom of the screen for everyone to view should they need them. And also there is a Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen should you need to ask questions at any time. We do have here two individuals who I will be introducing to whom questions may be directed. Before we introduce our speakers, I would like to introduce our president, Dr. Cocco De Filippis, to bring greetings and remarks. President?
Good afternoon and muy buenas tardes. I'm so happy to see that there's such a nice turnout. This is beautiful. Thank you for doing that. And happy almost St. Patrick's Day. As you can see, I'm already in green. Green is about the environment. Green is about celebrating the part of me that I'm sure is Irish somewhere. And it's also honoring our colleagues as well. So this afternoon, I am delighted that Senior Vice President Esther Rodriguez-Chardavoyne has made her team available to explain all of the good work that has been taking place here over the past several months to begin to get us ready. As I speak many times with my colleagues in the President's Council, I'm always amazed at how much we have done and how advanced we are as compared to other places that I will mention. But so I'm happy for that. I'm also welcome the opportunity to have questions because at this point, this is just about the facilities and how the facilities are here to support us through a safe and healthy transition to a future not too distant future, return to some sort of normalcy and a gradual reopening of the school. I want to say that I'm really happy to see that Luis Caraballo, one of our students in nursing, has joined us to bring wonderful greetings. And Zack Korenstein, who has stepped up to the plate and help us while Diane McFarland is recovering. And of course, Frank Virone, with whom I've taken many walks over the years as we walk the campus and make sure that it was attractive and so on. He's great. So very, very happy to have you also with us to support this. Our interim provost, Charles Drago, our executive council and labor designee, Eugene Song, and Ms. Pearl Shavson. Pearl, please forgive me if in any way I butcher that, who is also, I believe, the chief of staff to the SVP. So with that, I am going to pass the mic back to Diana, who will continue with the proceedings. And I will mute myself unless I'm required to answer a question.
Thank you, President. And for those of you that have since just joined us, thank you all for coming and welcome once more. This is our reopening facilities town hall for the entire campus community. And I would now like to move along and introduce our Senior Vice President for Administration and Finance, who is also wearing another hat as Interim Vice President of Student Development and Enrollment Management, Ms. Esther Rodriguez-Chardavoyne. And most importantly, for today's function, she is serving as our college's coronavirus campus coordinator. SVP?
Oh, thank you, Diana, and thank you, everyone, for coming. I'm inspired to see the number of people who are joining this forum. It shows the importance of what we have done to make our facilities safe. But before I begin, rather than doing it at the end, I want to do it at the beginning. I really want to thank a lot of our colleagues who've been showing up since March, since last March, when we closed down the campus, to continue supporting the process and also working with me and deciding what are the things that we would need to put in place, because I think similar to other places, we all believe that this closure was only going to be a couple of months. And so the idea back then was to figure out how we were going to reopen the campus. What are the components that we needed to have? Of course, we learned very quickly that that was not going to be what was going to happen, considering how fast this pandemic flew by. So I want to thank public safety, who were here all the time with me, campus operations that included my custodian staff, the laborers, maintenance and engineer, the environmental healthy and safety, and clearly our health and wellness, which is our nursing. Information technology, I can say that we could not have done anything without our assistant vice president for technology. He and his staff stepped up in making sure that our students got the devices, as well as our faculty, that was going to be needed for them to continue their studies and for them to continue the work that needed to be done until the semester ended. So I really just want to say I could not do any of what we have done without you. And I once again, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. It shows that during the pandemic, we see who are the people that, regardless of whether they're nervous about coming onto campus, they show up because they're dedicated to this institution and to the students. So for that, I am eternally grateful. I also want to thank, even though, one of the things that we've had to do is put a lot of signs throughout the campus, all the directional signs and stuff. And I want to have a party when we can take all those signs down, because that will show that we're back into what we call our normal. And we certainly could not do it without the help of the conference center and the staff there. And so again, this was a team effort that was done. And then one of the ideas as we were listening to all the conference meetings that we're having by the CDC and by our current governor about the stuff that people needed to think about. We kept talking about, how are we going to let people into the campus? What's going to happen? How are we going to check if they're okay? So the decision was made literally at 5 p.m. on a Friday. Well, maybe we can hire some nurses. Maybe we can hire some of our nursing students. And so right away, we reached out to Dr. King. And I would say within a day or two, he gave us a list of individuals that we were able to interview. And I was so proud of all the students that submitted their resumes and said, yes, I like to come and work on the campus. And the individual that I believe the president already interviewed, but let me repeat his name, Luis Caraballo, was the first students that we hired. He was our first nursing student that we hired. And again, it was just an incredible experience, just being able to interview these students. And they said, and they were still going to school, right? They were still doing their schoolwork. They were doing it during the day or in the evening. And many of them still to this day have a second job, because some of them are working at some of the hospitals. And so, but they stepped up. And so I want to turn it over to Luis so that he can give you a sense of what are the type of work that he was doing. And I believe he started with us in July. So let me turn it over to Luis so he can give you a little bit of his experience and the protocols that he was trained to do. Luis?
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Ms. Vice President. I'm one of the nursing students helping with the health and wellness department and the screening process here in the Hostos Community College. As I mentioned, I was a nursing student major and graduated from Hostos in December last year. Thank you so much. I'll be taking my English examination soon. Hope I pass my first try. Um, I usually come to work every day when we work in pair with the public safety officer. When I report to my assignment each day, I sit in one of the health screening tables in the building lobbies. From every person who visits, I check that they've answered all the COVID-19 questions on the Everbridge app. I also take the temperature with one of the touch free thermometers that we have here that we use. Everyone who passes the screening and gets one of the wristbands, this that we change the color every single day. For my own experience, this has been one of the great experience that I've ever had working. I want to thank Dr. Drago and Dr. King. Dr. King is the coordinator of the nursing program here, Hostos Community College. Right now, I'm doing my bachelor's degree in CUNY School of Professional Studies. That's it. That's pretty much.
Thank you, Luis.
Thank you so much.
So we're so happy you're continuing with your studies. That's what we want all our students to do.
Thank you.
So, so the next two individuals have already been introduced, but I'll reintroduce them. We have Frank Virone, who is our superintendent for the college, and Zack Korenstein, who is our consultant for health and safety. And he has joined us. As we all know, Diane is on medical leave, and I could say that I could not have a better person joining our team. He fit right in. He is very knowledgeable, and every day we're learning something new from him. So we're very grateful that he is working with us. So I want to, without delay, I want to turn it over to the two of them.
So good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who do not know me, I am Frank Virone, as previously mentioned. I am the Chief Administrative Superintendent for Hostos Community College. And I'll give you a little background as to what it is that I do. So my responsibilities, my general scope of work is the maintenance, repair, construction, and preservation of all building systems, including that of the exteriors, the grounds, interior finishes, and all the mechanical systems. So we'll get into the nuts and bolts of what it is that we're going to be discussing in a minute, but let me make this as a segue to properly introduce Zack Korenstein. He is an independent environmental health and safety consultant. He was brought in to assist us with our reopening plan and to assume some of the responsibilities that Diane McFarland, unfortunately on medical leave, was doing prior to her leave. So Zack comes to us with 20 years of experience in the sciences. He's rolled as an environmental scientist, was a member of the Scientific Advisory Board as the Senior Indoor Air Quality Specialist, and an environmental specialist at both Memorial Sloan Kettering and at NYU. So he comes here with a wealth of qualifications, and he's going to give to you his impression of what it is that we've done here, not only with the mechanicals, but also with the sanitary and disinfection component of what it is that we're doing, and some guidance on how to move forward as we start to reopen. So I'm going to give an opportunity now for Zack to introduce himself and to give you a little bit of background. So Zack.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you, SVP, President, and every member of the panel. My mother would be very proud with the kind remarks that everyone has given me. To give you a little bit more about my background in terms of what Frank said, I was kind of an integral member of the environmental health and safety team at New York University. I was actually a manager of health and safety at Memorial Sloan Kettering. And now, as Frank and others have indicated, I am an independent environmental health and safety consultant and helping now Hostos with the primary goal of the reopening plan and COVID-19. And of course, aside with other environmental health and safety responsibilities that Diane McFarland had. So I'd like to speak a little bit about the facilities and the actions that Frank and his team have taken. And first, let me speak a little bit about ventilation. And Frank, jump in at any point because Frank is also an expert, of course, in the HVAC systems here. So, and actually, I'm sorry, I'm going to back up for a moment. I also want to speak briefly about guidelines that have been put out by all the different agencies and institutions that have spoke about guidance on COVID. I think it's worth talking about how what I and Hostos and CUNY look to when it comes to guidance on appropriate actions for protecting individuals relative to COVID-19. Now, the first body, of course, is the CDC, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, which of course is a federal body. The CDC is going to put out broad guidelines for states and municipalities to adopt and take action on. So we start with the CDC, then we look to the New York State Department of Health, then we look to the New York City Department of Health. CUNY Central has taken those guidelines and given us a script or essentially a guideline to go by where Hostos can apply those guidelines to the campus. It's important to remember that at this time, there are no hard and fast laws or hard and fast regulations associated with transmission of SARS-CoV-2. We have guidelines, and we have to look at these guidelines and we have to apply them as best we can for the spaces that we have. You can actually see behind me one example. There's a sign right behind me indicating the occupancy of the room I happen to be in. Now, in terms of these guidelines, they are a range. There are not exact prescribed numbers because again, we have to apply it to our spaces, apply it to our buildings, and apply it to how we use our buildings. Now, the HVAC system, HVAC stands for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. These systems are how we get air in and out of our spaces. The guidance coming from CDC, state and city, indicate that we should get as close to 100% outside air as possible. Frank, we've been able to achieve that here at Hostos, where we are essentially taking in 100% outside air and then exhausting 100% outside air. This is the primary mode of ventilation in buildings of this type, meaning buildings that depend on the HVAC system to bring air in and bring air out. So that's the first important aspect of the building systems to remember, that Hostos has been able to get to that high range of the guidance to do that 100% air exchange. Now, in addition to that, it's important to remember that the air coming into the air HVAC systems are being filtered, conditioned, and treated. Hostos has actually increased the budget considerably related to filtration. Over 2.5 times the annual budget has been used at Hostos to put a minimum of MERV 13 filters on the HVAC systems. This is important, and this is a little better than a typical building. And again, is an action taken because of COVID-19 and our new reality. Now, beyond the filtration, there's actually installation of UVC. And I think at this point, a lot of us know a little bit about this. This is UVC lamps, and this is used in disinfecting in the hospital systems. UVC treatment, because essentially it is a light bulb giving off a UVC dose, actually, is capable of actually killing COVID. So Air comes into the building, it is filtered through at least MERV 13, then it is treated by the UVC lamps that actually kill COVID and other viruses and bacteria before it is supplied and pushed into our buildings where we work and eat and go about our business. Okay. Now, that is kind of in a nutshell the ventilation, and it's important to kind of understand that concept. Another real pillar in terms of the action that Hostos has taken is the cleaning regime. Been able to witness the cleaning protocols and actions of the custodial staff. They take it very seriously, okay? All surfaces are treated with appropriate disinfectants. All potential areas where people might touch are especially looked at very carefully, in addition to using hypochlorous acid, or as some folks know as a fogging. This is a technique used in many different facets now because of COVID, but it is not a new technology, okay? It is a very safe, non-toxic method of disinfecting, the hypochlorous acid fogging technique. And so this is used in classrooms as well. Every time individuals have entered spaces, there is a cleaning regime of that classroom, that conference room, or that office space. The other important aspect is, to this, which you can see if you are physically on campus, is the actual signage on doors. So there'll be dates of when cleaning has occurred. And that transparency and that communication is also important for everyone to understand. So the air has a lot more attention given to it in terms of the overall ventilation regime. The cleaning has been improved using the best techniques from the guidance from CDC, state, and city. And again, that frequency of cleaning is very important to remember, and the posting of that cleaning at spaces within Hostos, okay? And then one other thing I do want to mention is the part that you all play. We are still today in March, again, by guidance from others, from city, state, and the feds, that we are still in a situation where we are wearing masks. And it's really important to remember that where the infrastructure and the control that Hostos has on the infrastructure goes only so far until people also have to take their own action and use masks. And I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt myself. One other thing, signage. We have communicated the best guidance and the best practice through all of the signage, and not just signage on the wall, signage on the floor in terms of placement of individuals, to keeping that 6-foot distance within all applicable timeframes, and keeping that distance as much as possible. So that signage is also important. That's what we have done. And again, we as a Hostos community, students, staff, and faculty, we have to be vigilant still in wearing our masks on our face, nose, and mouth. It's really important that at all times in public on campus, we are wearing a mask when we are with other individuals. And I'll tell you, the only time I don't wear a mask is when I'm in a room by myself, like so, on a Zoom or whatnot. That's when a mask comes off. Any other time, and I'm sure many of the panelists I do interact with, they'll tell you, there's not a moment that the mask is not off of my face, because that's my part to play in keeping the rest of the community safe. Hostos, Frank, and SVP have done their part, I think, better than most buildings have done in New York City. This is an anecdotal based on my clients, okay, that they have really done, I'd say, again, the high end of the guidance that has been given out by CDC, state, and city. We are in good shape. It's also important to remember, of course, that things will change. This is March. We're talking about reopening in September. I guarantee you there will be new guidance and new changes in terms of what everyone should do, whether it comes from a facility standpoint and or even personal behavior. I'm very hopeful. You know, I am not a doctor. I am not an infectious disease doctor, but we have more vaccines becoming available to everyone. I myself am anxious to get my own vaccine. I encourage you all to do the same. I think there's a very high likelihood, but that as the months go by, more and more people will be vaccinated. And that in and of itself will create a safer environment for all of us to learn and work in. And so again, I'm not an expert on vaccines. I encourage it. I'm going to do it myself. Members of my family will do it as well. That will help protect all of us. And again, from a ventilation standpoint, from a health and safety standpoint of being here today, Hostos is doing an excellent job. All of the parameters that we are being asked to conduct and take action on, Hostos has taken them extremely seriously. And again, as I said, at that high end of the guidance, because there's a range, but we are at that high end of guidance in terms of ventilation, treatment, signage, and all the other aspects to create a safer campus for everyone here.
Thank you, Zach. I appreciate you taking a moment to talk a little bit about the changes that have been made to the buildings, in particular to the ventilation, some of the physical barriers, in controlling and not only the space, but also ensuring that it's a little bit safer for everyone as they continue to return. I would like to ask a question that has been submitted. And if we can begin, I would like to address some of the questions in the Q&A since there are a significant number. So with that, here's the first one. There's a lot of talk everywhere about opening windows and bringing in outside air, especially for K through 12 education. Can you explain how this does or doesn't apply to the college, and what measures has the college done related to this? This was by an anonymous submission.
I'll field that question. Thank you, Diana. Typically, as you probably all remember going to school through your high school, grammar school days, K through 12 are facilities that do not have air handling units. There is no air conditioning in those buildings generally because the college is on, the schools are on recess during the summer months. So therefore, they're dependent upon opening windows. We have pretty much sealed environments with windows closed. We have air handling systems which handle the air, which disinfect the air, filter the air. So that does not apply to Hostos Community College in the facilities that we have. So in buildings that do not have an ability to introduce 100% outside air via mechanical means, a window has been recommended to be open to try to dilute the air in the space and therefore create a outdoor kind of environment indoors. So basically, we have air handling systems. It's different technology from K through 12.
Frank, thank you. There is a follow-up question from the same person, and they ask, can you address more specifically ongoing concerns about areas across the campus where people have complained about air quality related respiratory issues, like in the B building? How do we know individual rooms are safe?
Okay, so through the years, and I commiserate with all of the people who've had to deal with the construction in the B building. It's unfortunate, but it is a process. So with some of these complaints, and we've taken them seriously, we've had independent environmental specialists come in, air sample the air, and it has never been founded to have any adverse issues concerning the air. So it was always within the parameters of being satisfactory inside the space. And a lot of the times where people believe that there may be an issue with their space because they've moved, this is dealing specifically now with the B building, from one room to another. The fact that through the years, the building has been compartmentalized, where walls were put up where they did not exist to the original construction. There may be a thermostat located in another location, which that gets satisfied because of the amount of people in that room, and then another room may be cooler. But there's never an issue with the amount of air being supplied in any of the buildings. So it's always been unfounded that there was any issue with the air in the B building ever.
If I can just add one thing. Again, I am a consultant. I'm relatively new here. I can't speak to all issues of the past, but I was given the most recent indoor air quality survey by an independent consultant, not me. And I just have to really say the same thing that Frank did, which is that all of the typical indoor air quality parameters, often carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, temperature, and relative humidity, were all well within normal ranges. That was in August of 2020. Again, I can't speak to further back in time. I would also suggest, just in a general aspect, that oftentimes indoor air quality problems are somewhat subjective. Not that they aren't real, but I think it's important to understand that sometimes this is an issue of temperature. Humidity is a big aspect sometimes in the comfort of an individual in a space. And it's worth noting, I think also, I'm sure Frank would agree, that again, the tweaks, the changes and improvements of the HVAC system have actually increased ventilation. It should actually be a more comfortable environment. So I think it's important to mention that oftentimes, not always, but the majority of the time, these indoor air quality problems are a comfort issue. And again, when tested, again, August 2020, it was certainly found to be the case. Everything was well within normal ranges for the typical indoor air quality parameters.
Thank you, Zach. We've just undergone a fourth floor renovation project, which had a component to do the mechanicals in the subcellar of that building as well. And with the improved and larger capacity supply and return air fans and all the ancillary equipment, any of the issues that we may have had with not being able to provide enough of air in a space that could be easily controlled now with the new and improved equipment. So that's no longer a consideration or an issue for us. That equipment is all brand new, in addition to, again, the UVC lighting and that particular building. In fact, the B building has the best filtration system of all the buildings campus-wide. The B building employs both MERV 8 and MERV 15 filters. So the MERV 15 filters, they can capture microns down to 3 microns and an effective capture rate of about 85 to 90%. So it's almost like wearing a K95 mask with the filtration just for the airstream. So that is the best actually on campus right now as far as filtration system. The rest of the buildings are using MERV 13, but the B building has MERV 8 as a pre-filter and MERV 15 as their primary filters. So anybody being in the B building should not have an issue with or feeling comfortable about being in that space.
Thank you both. I would like to take a moment before the next question to just share with the entire audience a few of these acronyms that are repeating, since I am seeing quite a significant number of questions related to their meaning. HVAC stands for heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. UVC stands for ultraviolet C, as in UVC light. And MERV, M-E-R-V, is an acronym for minimum efficiency reporting values. With that, I'd like to move on to our next question, which is asking if we are reevaluating capacity limits. The original limits were based on 12 feet between folks, a 6 feet radius around each person. I've seen new guidelines looking at 3 feet between people. I also see that everyone who wants a vaccine will have one by the fall, and yet the capacity limits we're working with will require 12 feet between people. Can you let us know, Zach or Frank, what the capacity limits are and what we plan them to be for the fall?
So the question of capacity will change. We are going at this moment in time with roughly 25% capacity. And again, SVP, please correct me if some of what I'm saying is a little off. The goal for September, as I understand it, is 50% occupancy. So we need to understand first that even the goal in September is 50% typical occupancy. And as I said before, the reality on the ground no doubt will change by September. We are going with a very restrictive occupancy in this moment in time, because of where we are at in terms of the duration of this current health crisis, if we can call it that. So, again, I think, as I had said before, I want to move away from specific metrics of 100, of 200, of 300. By the way, the guidance from the CUNY Central is a guidance of between roughly 100 and 200 square feet per person. That's also based on the overall occupancy of the room. It's also based on the use of the room. Some of the rooms that we've viewed in preparation to reevaluate the occupancy, some of these rooms have a ceiling of 30 feet high. Now, when you take that into consideration, the ventilation in some of these rooms is greatly improved because you're in less of a confined space. So I would like, if we can, to try to inch back from a declarative square footage per person because one, it will change. Vaccination rates will change that. And then will we be fully masked in September? I can't answer that question. I think we don't know exactly. Right now, everyone is masked. Right now, the ventilation is highly improved. There's no planning to ramp down that ventilation, by the way. If anything, we need to continue to take guidance from the city, state, and from the feds. And I would believe, and again, SVP, tell me if I'm wrong, probably the item that is most flexible might be that occupancy, again, because of the factors I had just mentioned.
Zach, you are correct. The university is, we've raised it and I've gotten several emails from faculty. So yes, that is a discussion in terms of, what is the distance in a classroom, and that's certainly going to change. So that'll give us the ability to have more students coming in to campus than we had projected based on the 113 square feet distance. So I think, again, we're very confident that we will get better guidance. The CDC has come out with that. There are conversations about it. So I'm hopeful that we can have a better presence of our students for those classes that will be on campus, which is the 25% requirement that the chancellor has asked us to have,
Okay.
and we're near there. We've gotten a lot of good interest from departments, especially some faculty, and we're very happy about that. And
I would like to just say that this question at this point, I'm waiting to receive recommendations. We're discussing facilities now, but I'm waiting to receive recommendations from academic affairs as well as to what can or cannot be based on the conditions of the facilities. We are also going to revisit this in June when we see what the students' interest is in terms of preliminary schedules. And then as also we see what the situation is with the pandemic itself and the vaccinations, whether there's very ambitious goals to have everything available to everyone May 1st actually takes place, and that also the vaccinations make it to folks' arms. But what I'm hearing thus far is pretty much with my understanding that this is been highly a highly cared for process on behalf of the reopening team and SVP and her team and all of you in terms of monitoring. So some things we cannot get ahead of where we are, so we're looking at facilities in terms of reopening. That's a determination that has not been made, although it is hope that because there's so much student interest in coming back to the campus that we can see what we can safely reopen and when that decision is made. So it'll begin with a preliminary class schedule and then with a revisit of that in June. I say that for those who are concerned. There's nothing rash about this process at all.
Thank you, President. I'd like to move on to the next question. It is regarding library and open spaces. And the question is, will there be areas for study? Students expressed having difficulty concentrating at home or needing a different setting to complete their assignments and or meet with group members.
My understanding is that we're having a meeting in a day or two to dive deeper on that subject, to see what we can do in terms of specific planning for the library, to have some, as the president said, careful reopening of that space. I don't think I can comment on the specifics now because, like I said, this is a meeting that's about to take place in a couple of days. But again, that's a priority meeting that's come to me from the SVP, where, like I said, we're going to be looking extremely closely and carefully of how some of that reopening can happen. And I can't really say now because we have to go through that process and make sure we're very deliberate and careful with the choices that Hostos makes.
Understood. The next question is from Craig Bernardini. And the question is, where are we with the CLIP and PROW buildings? For those that do not know, those are our rented spaces for continuing education and workforce development, located down in the Gateway exterior building, right by the Major Deegan overpass. He says, I know these aren't owned by the college, so we're dealing with a management company. Have these buildings also been equipped with MERV 13 filters and UV? What is the status of negotiating with said companies in terms of making their ventilation on par with the rest of the campus? Thanks.
I understand that Kevin Carmine in procurement is dealing with the maintenance and service people for both of those facilities. And I believe that they did entertain or actually installed MERV 13 filters for the air filtration in those buildings. I don't think Zach can speak to that. And my involvement with those buildings is very limited. So I do believe, and we will get back to you with the confirmation as to whether or not that indeed happened. But my conversations with Mr. Carmine, and this is going back months ago, that was already addressed.
Yes, Frank, thank you, because that is correct. They did address it again. This is a leasing for us. This is their building. We can't mandate them to do anything, but they understood our situation, so they put in the filter, the necessary filters. From my understanding right now, those two buildings are currently closed. And there will be a discussion whether they're going to be open or not. So at this point, I really can't answer that question.
I'll move along to the next one, which is from Linda Miles. And the question is, how often is this air fully expelled and replaced with newly filtered treated air? And is this rate the same in every room?
Okay, so I can't speak to individual rooms. I know that there was a request to try to produce some information, some data for you guys. So we have, and we were able to at least give you a sense of what each building's air exchange rate is. So depending on the building, I can give you some specifics. For argument's sake, the Savoy Manor is outfitted with 4 air handling units. I won't get into the specifics, but the math is that it has 41,000 cubic feet of air per minute being provided. There's a space of 425,000 cubic feet of air, which results in a 5.8 air exchange per hour. So the Savoy building is 5.8 air exchanges per hour. The 475, the old wing, is actually 8.8 air exchanges per hour. The new wing of the A building is 4.2 air exchanges per hour. The 500 building is 7.5 air exchanges per hour, and the East Academic building is 7.1 air exchanges per hour. Fully exchanged 100%, 7 times an hour is for the East Academic building.
Let me just reiterate what Frank said. So the minimum is 4 air changes per hour. The maximum is actually over 8 air changes per hour for the building in its entirety. And actually, that air is being filtered, it is being treated, but actually it is fresh air. So there is no recirculated air coming back into the building. I thought I heard something of that in the question. But by the way, this is, again, at the higher end of the guidance. There is no specific law, but this is guidance. And in fact, in this past year, in the COVID era, Harvard School of Public Health actually indicated that for this time of COVID in classrooms, I'm extrapolating from K through 12 to university, that 4 to 6 air changes per hour is very good. So again, think about it as all of the air within the room is completely changed out 4 times per hour, up to 8 times per hour. So that is a high ventilation rate for a typical higher education building.
Thank you, Zach. I'd like to move along to the next question, which is from an anonymous attendee, and they ask, in a space with cubicles and open air above the cubicles, do we have to wear masks, and will there be proper signage to encourage mask wearing?
Yes. At
Thank
this
you.
time, you need to wear masks until we say otherwise.
Thank you. The next question is from Laura McGowan. She asks, good afternoon, everyone. After speaking about safety in our existing buildings, can you give us an update on the new 425 Grand Concourse building and mention any structural or design changes that may have been made to the original plans due to the pandemic? Also, is there an expected occupancy date set for the college? Thank you.
Yes, in fact, during, I'm sorry, Diana. Yes, in fact, during the preliminary schematic design, we've already had asked them to provide at minimum MERV 13 filters, filtration for that building. So they will be outfitted very similar to the rest of our buildings in the space that we are occupying, because it's a standalone system for the first floor in which Hostos is committed to rent.
Thank you, Frank. Before I move to the next question, for those of you submitting them into the Q&A, please make sure you are specific so that the panelists do know how to answer these questions best, since it has been some time and I am taking them in the order that they were received. So if you need to, please go back and amend your questions. Moving along, the next one asks, would people be required to be vaccinated by the reopening time? It's from Marino Cornieri.
I'm not sure if I can actually answer that. That seems like a higher decision than just me. SVP,
I would like to just chime in here for a second. Understanding that the availability of the vaccinations are loosening up, and with May 1st, they just recently informed us, I'm sorry, May 1st, there will be no restrictions for getting vaccinations. So anybody who elects to have a vaccination, it will most likely be available. So it's in your own best interest to do that if you elect to do so. The science is there saying that it's your better bet than to play Russian roulette without doing it. But come September, which is 6 months out from now, which is half the duration period that we've already endured with the COVID, and with the math of President Biden with the 100 million people in 100 days, if you extrapolate the math going for another 150 days, that's 280 million people possibly being vaccinated in the United States if they elect to do that, of the 340 million people that are in the United States. So that's 80%, 75, 80% of the population come September should be vaccinated if they elect to do so.
I just want to follow up in terms of, we really, I think Frank gave an overview in terms of what we see the vaccine as it's moving based on what we've heard from the Biden administration. CUNY would have to make a decision whether it's mandated for people to to be vaccinated, to come back. That is not a decision that we can make. That's a decision that's usually made at the CUNY level. But again, with the May 1st having the vaccine available to everybody, we are encouraging everybody to get vaccinated.
I believe the chancellor has been vaccinated. Most of the presidents have been vaccinated. I have had my 2 doses. I share that with you all. And I think half of my team is already vaccinated. It is, whether it can be mandated or not, that's not a decision that has been made, but it's a common sense decision, let me tell you, given the consequences. More than 500,000 people have died.
Thank you, President. I just do want to say again, sometimes vaccination is a sensitive personal issue. I didn't really want to make any assumptions, but I would actually say this. I also am hopefully will be vaccinated soon, but I'm just going to take something from a past life. When I worked at Memorial Sloan Kettering in the hospital system, there is a mandate for flu vaccine. However, even then, they don't force employees to take a flu shot. If you don't take a flu shot, again, I'm talking about BC, before COVID, you have to wear a mask. So that might be something. I'm not suggesting that Hostos or CUNY should do that. I'm saying in the hospital industry, staff who typically do not take flu shots must wear a mask. I'd prefer a vaccine than to having to wear a mask myself. And that was a choice I made back before COVID.
Thank you. And I would like to also add here just a brief note for those of you seeking a vaccine. I know it is a quite difficult process in New York City right now, but for those of you that are eligible, SOMOS, SOMOS, is a great resource, and you can look them up. They do have availability in the Bronx significantly, because folks are really trying to tread carefully. So do reach out to the services that are available to you through the nyc.gov portal and try to schedule your vaccine appointments if you wish to do so. I'd like to move along with some of the questions. The next one is from Linda Ridley, and she asks, how do you handle airflow in offices that have no vents? The only way to get air is to open the door to the hallway. Frank?
I'm unaware of any offices that do not have vents, and if that's something that I need to investigate, I will. I can't imagine that being the case, but it most certainly could have been, possibly in the B building with the fact that through the years it's been compartmentized. But I will look into it if I can get a specific space.
Thank you, Frank. Would we like to recommend that this individual email you directly?
Yes, please.
Okay, so Linda Ridley, if you'd like, you can email Frank. His email is fvirone@ostos.cuny.edu. Moving along, the next question is from an anonymous attendee, and they ask, will summer afternoon HVAC operation continue to be turned off and indoor air circulated to conserve energy?
No. The system right now is running 24/7. In the past, BC, as Zach indicated, before COVID, we would operate 16 hours a day. And during the evening hours, the system has been shut down. Right now, we're purging the building 24/7. So we're getting fresh air in, fresh air out of the building on every hour of the day. So during the evening hours, when the buildings are not occupied, they're being purged completely the same way they're operating as if it was an occupied building. So it's 100% fresh air in, and we're exhausting the remaining air. So there is no recirculated air at all, ever.
Thank you. The next question comes to us from Marcela Benchiveni, and she asks, is there any plan to continue with the renovation of the 3rd floor in the B building? And if so, when will it commence?
SVP, do you want me to field that question?
Well, I'll start it. So there was a meeting with central office, and they have indicated that the project is going to be back on schedule. And we are probably looking to later on in the year. And when I say later on in the year, I'm talking May and June academic year, to begin the discussion as to when this particular 3rd floor will begin. Of course, the first part will be the abatement that will be done. So we don't have any dates right now, but it seems that it will, if all things go well, it sounds like it will start in the summer. People will have to move into the swing space, and I don't want to get away from this particular, but there will be a lot of meetings and discussions with the third floor occupants for us to discuss what are the steps for the renovation.
Thank you, SVP. Our next question comes from Julia Vargas, and she asks, how will these capacity percentages affect the theater? What is the plan with this area? Frank?
Again, as Zach indicated, this is going to change. The environment, the theater itself with the high ceilings, as Zach had indicated with other spaces, that's something that's going to have to be looked at a little bit more carefully. We certainly have enough of room in the theaters to have social distancing and still be able to put on a performance if that is what the administration wants to do. Again, it will be set up the same way as any other space. You know, everybody's got to have to deal with the behavioral modifications. We have all of the mechanical modifications and modalities in place. So again, I'm not sure specifically what the question is, but the capacity is going to be something that's going to be determined, I guess, in the immediate future. Once we get a better guidance from CUNY Central as to what parameters there are with the social distancing aspect.
Thank you, Frank. It is just a little bit after 4 p.m. and we originally had planned for this to be a 1-hour event. And given the time allocation, SVP has just sent me a brief note, and she has graciously offered to extend this event for another 15 minutes, given the high volume of questions. So I'd like to continue, if I may. Frank, I believe this one is for you as well. It is also from Marcela Benchiveni, and she asks, how many classrooms can safely accommodate 15 socially distanced students? Could the multi-purpose room in the Savoy building, for instance, be used?
Well, if you're speaking, thank you, Professor. If you're speaking the multi-purpose room, I believe that most certainly can handle 15 students. I don't have a chart available for other spaces or other multiple multi-use spaces, but the multi-purpose room most certainly, and I'll go back to it. If I'm in error in speaking to this, I will get back to you. But I believe that the multi-purpose room can easily handle 15 people.
Yeah, thank you. You were little low. I think we can accommodate up to 27 students based on the analysis that we did. And we did look at larger spaces, and we are looking at so that, so those are things that we are looking at. And the multipurpose is clearly one of them, and it can handle 27 students at a social distance, at the current social distance. So if it gets shrunk, it could accommodate more.
And my apologies for not having that information available. I know that this was really kind of geared towards heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, and we're kind of going a little bit off topic. Certainly answer the questions if we have that information available, but any other questions can be sent to me and I will get back to you with the specific information.
Thank you, Frank. I do believe this next question is concerning the air filtering equipment. And this anonymous attendee asks, will concerned staff or faculty be allowed to use personal, such as Dyson, air filtering equipment within their personal office space?
I personally don't recommend having to do that. One, it puts an extra load on the electrical capacity of the college as it is. Right now, we're already taxed. We have a capital project in the works for trying to expand our electrical capacity. It's not going to make it any healthier in the space, especially if it's a private office and it's a single occupancy room. You can control that pretty much by social distancing if you have another occupant in the room with you. But that's something that I tend to not entertain.
Thank you. The next question is from Elizabeth Wilson. And the question is, when determining occupancy for offices, was desk placement taken into account? Desk placement limits how distant staff can be. For offices that serve students, how do we address that occupancy limit? So such as students can't enter if we are at our limit.
Again, I don't know how to answer this question. I'm prepared really here to deal with the mechanicals and the nuts and bolts of how we operate. Those questions, we'll have to get back to you. Anything dealing with how those numbers came or the rationale for how we developed those numbers, that was something done, I think that was in concert with Diane and Elizabeth Friedman, who unfortunately both of them are out on medical. So I know that as a result of some walkthroughs, I know that the desk placement for the instructor being at the front of the classroom was given his or her own specific space. And then it was determined how many people could be in that room based on a 6-foot distance from the face of the desk moving forward. So the room, as if the room was cordoned off from the front of the instructor desk towards the back, that indicated how many people can be in the room, which was inclusive of that of the instructor.
I just want to, and again, I don't want to dwell on this too long, but when we were looking at some of the offices, and again, in terms of the number of people that can be there, it is with the understanding that each area will do a plan as to how they will bring in their staff and take into account whether they need to see students. And of course, the students will have to make appointments because we cannot have people crowd in one specific area. So it's going to be in individual departments that will have to work with us to determine how they're going to do their rotation, what kind of appointments they're going to have, so that we make sure that we adhere to the reopening plan.
And I would say, I think that we need to be realistic. And of course, SVP, Frank, myself, everyone on the team is going to be working with specific departments to help them go through those unknowns and attempt to help you with a plan that makes the most sense for your comfort level and your department.
Thank you. The next question is from Marina Corniel. I believe this is for you, Zach. He asks, guidance versus law. What is the difference when it comes to our health?
That's a great question. So really what I was getting at is that the current safety laws, for the most part, are related to a number of specific regulators. It is very difficult actually to mandate specific safety rules. OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, is the federal body that attempts to protect workers at work. They have enforceable laws. Essentially, the difference between guidance and a regulation or a law is that there's an enforceable mechanism to actually have the individual, institution, business take action. Guidance, for the most part, means there isn't an enforceable action, i.e., the CDC does not have COVID cops that come out to Hostos to say, you need more square footage or less square footage. This is not an indication of, how should I put this? This isn't an indication of ignoring the problem. It's more an indication of, is there an enforceable mechanism or is there no enforcement mechanism? As I said before, because we are in a new era with this health crisis, I believe that the federal government, as well as state and local governments, were probably hesitant to make hard and fast laws, and they didn't have the mechanism to enforce them. That's why we are left essentially with guidance from the CDC, guidance from the state, the city, and from CUNY. It's not to indicate that we are not taking all measures and then some to actually keep the community safe. It was only an indication that guidance allows more flexibility to apply it to our specific circumstance. And ultimately, it's really about, is it enforceable or not?
Thank you, Zach. I'd like to move along to Christina Morales, and she asks, piggybacking on Linda's question about air exchange, even if all indoor air is fully expelled and replaced, 7 times per hour is circulating through several rooms in a way that exposes people to the air from other classrooms or offices upstream, so that one carrier can potentially spread the virus to people who are in other rooms.
The building is designed to provide enough of CFM for the occupants in a space. And when a building is designed, it's also, the HVAC system is also balanced. So what does that mean? If I was to provide air into a space and not exhaust it, so if I was providing 20,000 CFM of air into a space and not exhaust that air and have the doors closed, windows closed, I would be pressurizing the room. So that would make an uncomfortable scenario, because as you do open up a room, you'll feel a tremendous amount of draft being pulled or pushed into a space, depending on where the positive section of that building is. The same with it being in a negative space. In labs, for argument's sake, like a chemistry lab where you have fume hoods, you want that space to be negative, because you are typically or naturally, because it's a biology lab, wanting to exhaust 100% of the air. That's typical in a chemistry lab, even prior to COVID. So that's a negative space in which you want to have. Rooms, the air is going to migrate through all the return grills, or all the return air now, which is a ducted system, which generally would be used to return the air back into the system. That air that's already been preheated or pre-cooled is now used as an exhaust fan. So the return air fans are now providing 100% exhaust air. So all that air is being spilled to the outside. So how the air is filtrating through the building is as its natural design element it had been considered initially upon design. I don't know if I'm answering that question, but air inside the building, and Zach would probably piggyback on this. This is where behavioral modifications with regards to social distancing and masks come into play. You still have to be vigilant in wearing your mask and social distancing to protect yourself. But everything that could possibly be done in the building has been done. And Zach had mentioned that we're at the upper end. In fact, we're above the upper guidance, because the guidance from the CDC had never recommended to use UVC lighting. That was something that we employed ourselves. That may be something that's a requirement in hospitals, but we elected to do that. Zach, if I'm wrong about that statement, please jump in. But so I don't think you have to fear the environment inside the building, as long as you do your own behavioral modifications as far as wearing a mask and doing the proper social distancing, washing your hands, keeping to the right, and doing your best to protect yourself, you will be fine inside this environment.
If I can piggyback off that, Frank. So one thing, the CDC did recommend UVC if possible. That's oftentimes how the language is. It was possible. It's not always possible in all heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems. One other thing, CFM, cubic feet per minute. And so that's a measurement for the individual within the space. And then to go back to the question, ultimately, there is not exhaust air going from room to room. There is supply air coming in and exhaust air from each individual room. Correct me if I'm wrong, Frank, each individual room that is exhausted out. So there is not exhausted air migrating from one room to the next. It's going out of the system, the ductwork, and leaving the building. Is that right, Frank?
That is correct.
Okay.
Thank you both. We are running over the time, and I would like to just ask one final question before I turn it over to SVP to close, as this is on par with the current subject matter. Alida Pastoriza asks, the dental hygiene clinic, which is treating patients, has 7 exchanges per hour, the same as the rest of the 500 building. Could the dental hygiene air contaminate the rest of the 500 building? Does the clinic have dedicated filters and air exchanges?
Yes, the dental clinic has, well, it's actually a hybrid, and I'll try to explain this off a little bit. The dental clinic proper, the area where the 24 dental chairs is located, has its own specific dedicated air handling system. The rest of the clinic, and actually that moves really past the offices, but from the service desk, from the reception counter towards the right where the classrooms and the x-ray equipment is part of the building system. The main air handling system for the 500 building. So the dental clinic is kind of split up into two units, but the dental clinic proper has its own complete system that has its own air exchange rates. It has its UVC lighting as well, and it has its MERV 13 filters. None of the air is being exchanged, even if it didn't have it. None of the air is being exchanged with the rest of the building because we're exhausting 100% of the air that's being introduced into the building. So it's not a point in either way, but yes, it does have an independent system.
Thank you so much. I'd like to at this moment thank you all for submitting your questions and apologize in the event that we were unable to get to all of them. As you see, we did have 49 submitted to us, and I do think we've tried to do the best we can under the time constraints. If you do have any questions pertaining to the buildings or the facilities, as Frank mentioned earlier, please direct them to his attention via email, and he will do his best to respond to you. And Pearl at this time will be sharing 2 links on the screen so that you may review the college's reopening plan and also have access to the information and guidelines that have been discussed today. SVP, is there anything else you'd like to say to close?
All I want to say is thank you again for everyone who joined us and in your interest. I'm very happy to see all the number of questions that are in the Q&A. And for those questions that we didn't get to, please again, email them to us. We all know that everyone is nervous as we move into our next phase, and especially the reopening. But as the president mentioned earlier, we are doing this very carefully, thoughtful, so that we are basically taking small steps towards this reopening because we all know that it's a safe way to move forward. So again, thank you for us joining, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your afternoon.